Right, I think we're off and running. So different angle for the camera this time because I want you to be able to see quite a lot of the table because we're working a bit bigger. And I'm going to show you, I'll just move that off my print, a little bit about breakdown printing because it's quite hard to explain, but it's actually a very simple process. What we're going to do is we're going to use water-soluble media on a silk screen. This is a silk screen, this is a little one. So we're going to use water-soluble media on here and we're going to let it dry. Now it's very important that you only use water-soluble, and that does not mean water-based. So for instance, acrylic paint is water-based, but it is not water-soluble once dry. Once acrylic paint is dry, that's it, it's not going anywhere. You can wipe it, you can wash it. And only part of it will come off. So we don't want to let acrylic paint ever dry on our screens. That's a different workshop and a different thing, but I just wanted to clarify that I'm talking about water soluble, not water based. Water soluble media are those that when they've dried but you re-add water will start to break down, will start to re-wet and bleed out again. Hence the word they start to break down, so this is breakdown printing. So the one I'm going to use is thickened dye. So this is Procyon dye, which is mixed in with Manutex. Manutex is a seaweed derivative. The first thing I'm going to do actually before I go any further, because I will forget, I've got my barrier cream here. I am using dye. I don't want dye in my bloodstream. Dye is liquid and it's absorbed. You can see that it's absorbed into the fibres of cloth. If you look at dyed cloth, it will also be absorbed through my skin, through the pores. Your skin is your largest organ. It's very effective at absorbing things. If you think of HRT or nicotine replacement therapy, we put them on our skins. It's a very efficient way of getting things into our bloodstream. So I've barrier creamed my hands and arms to make sure that although I may get mucky, the dye is not going to actually be absorbed into my body. Right, so I'm going to use a thickened dye. That's where we were. So thickened dye. This is a Nita pot that I've just made up for a workshop tomorrow, and this is just basically Manutex, which is a seaweed derivative. It's a powder. You sprinkle it into water, you mix it up and you leave it for a few hours. This one is still thickening, it's still a bit too gloopy, but this one, which I made a couple of weeks ago, is beautifully thick and gloopy and is just how I want it to be. When I want a colour of Manutex, all I do is I add some dye powder into the Manutex. So I'm going to go and look for a colour I haven't got. No, I'm not. Yes, I am. No, yes, I am. We'll see if I can do it quickly. Bear with me. Bear with me. What haven't I got? What haven't I got? Or what have I not got a lot of that I really like? Oh, come on, stop umming and just make a decision here. Burnt orange, I've got loads of that. Turquoise. Turquoise thick. Okay, haven't got a lot of this, only a tiny bit. So what I'm going to do is put some, I don't know actually, see, this is supposed to be breakdown printing and I've gone off on one, but anyway, you need to know how to do this. So I'm just putting, you can see how thick and gloopy that paste is now, some Manutex into the pot. I'm putting it straight on top of the other dye that's in there. I'm not bothered about, I am really unfussy about all of this. I just think dyeing can sound far too complicated and it doesn't need to be. It's very difficult to fail to dye something actually. It's such strong stuff, Procyon dye, you're almost certainly going to dye things with it. So there, we've got a nice pot full of Manutex and a bit of dye. And I'm going to just go in the cupboard behind, so bear with, you might actually see my... No, you're not going to see my face. What a shame. I do have a face, you know. I do have a face. Here we go. Turquoise dye, I need a teaspoon. You can tell, I thought I prepared for this, but obviously not particularly well. That's the noise of me finding a teaspoon. Here we go. So I've got turquoise dye here. I should mask up whenever there's dye powder loose in the atmosphere. To be honest, if you're just doing it for yourself or one pot like this, all I am going to do is hold my breath while the dye pot is open so I don't breathe the fumes. So bear with me a minute. And that's it, that's now in liquid. The powder's no longer powdery, so it's not going into the atmosphere, so I can breathe again. To be honest, just for safety, I do put a mask on whenever I'm mixing dyes. I just don't see any point in risking it. They're the only things that I use that have any real safety precautions about them. None of the paints and things that I do. And I just think it's not very difficult to stick a mask on, so I might as well do it. And I mix up lots of dyes at once. So you can see it's a fairly rough and ready mix. That was about a teaspoon, and this is about 200-250 mils of Manutex, and that's made me a nice thick turquoise dye. Okay, so let's use that dye. I've got turquoise and I've got some lime here. So let's start off, and I've also got Merlot, Robin Eggs Blue and Lemon. Let's move this first. Just wanted to show you these, because there's some dyed cloths. This one actually isn't a breakdown. This is a bit of an advert for the Lovely Leaves workshop, because this is a screen print that I've done using leaves, and they weren't actually leaves fresh from the garden at the moment because it's the middle of winter. So these were leaves that I preserved in glycerine, which print really well. And I've got lots of leaves preserved in glycerine, and we'll be preserving some more on the Lovely Leaves workshop. So that's that one. But these other cloths, oh, I never know where to put things. These other cloths, these are breakdown cloths. So this one, I'm trying to get it so you can see it in the camera. This one is a breakdown of a stencil called Coaster, which has made some really interesting, if I hold, see if I can get some of it up. I've got still photos of these, so I'll put them on the website anyway. It gives you these really interesting broken down prints. And this one was one done with a stencil called Kale, which again has given some really interesting broken down prints. And Kale is the stencil I've got out here, so I'm going to show you how to set up a screen for that. So with no more ado, let's get that. I've got an A3 screen. Most of my screens are A3, simply because, and that's actually one of the ones that got wrecked at Bath, I can see it is. So I'll just get another A3 screen. That one's got muck all over it. The thing about A3 is I can mask it off to make a smaller area, so if you're only going to have one or two screens, it's worth having them bigger, and then if you want to do bigger prints you can, and if I want a smaller area I can just mask it off with masking tape. This is, I'm not going to go into great detail about these screens, but just to say this is an aluminium screen, so it's very lightweight, and the joy of it is I don't have to cover it in duct tape, I don't have to protect it, it can't rot. It will last for life, basically, unless I wreck the mesh, which I don't intend to do. Okay, so I'm putting my screen down. I've got a stencil here. Again, this one is Kale. It doesn't matter, just choose a stencil that you like the pattern of. And let's go in with that turquoise. And I fancy a bit of lime as well. So I'm opening up my two dyes. I'm going to get a few spoons. And I'm going to get some squeegees. Squeegee-wise, if you know me, you'll know that I'm not terribly keen on the big posh squeegees. I find those very hard to use. My preference is for something like this, which is a cake icing tool, or this, which is for checking the treads in your tyres, or wonderfully, and probably my favourites are these, which are credit cards, Costco Wholesale, Costa Coffee Club, that's another cake icer, etc. Whenever you see one of these, somebody offering you one, just get it grabbed up because they are so useful. So let's start. I'm going to get a tray. Well, I really wasn't very well prepared, was I? Okay. I'm going to get a tray so that I can put some of these dyes out on here. So we'll have some turquoise and some lime green. I think that'd be a nice combination. And I'm just simply going to pick up some of them on my squeegee. Okay, so I've got some dye on my squeegee and I'm going to push it through the stencil. And you can see I've got two nice colours going there. This isn't hard to do. It sounds and looks harder than it actually is. When you actually do it, it's very, very easy. You just want to make sure it's gone through. You don't need masses. Otherwise, as Donna would tell you, it'll dribble all down your screen when your teacher props it up to dry. So you don't need loads, just enough to get through these gaps. Dye is a lovely, cheap way of getting colour onto things. So I've covered that one. I'm taking time to get rid of the excess so that it'll dry reasonably quickly. Lift my stencil, and I have a beautiful pattern on my screen. Now, because my screen is A3 and the stencil is 12 by 12, I am just going to take a bit of time to just put a bit more down the other end so that we've got a full screen. So as I say, this seems as though it's going to be very complicated and it's all going to smudge and stuff, but it isn't really. It's very, very easy. Just get it walloped on like that. I don't need the bit that's left around the edge of the screen there, so I'll get myself some tissue and just wipe that off. And I will then put this screen to dry. Okay, 1 potato. And 2 potatoes. Right, so I'm just going to put that to one side to dry. The other way I like to make screens, well, there's loads of ways you can make screens, but another nice way, using things that we've used for other things, is to use some of the Indian blocks. So on this one, I've picked up the 3 ammonite blocks, which Alison did some beautiful breakdowns with these at the last Make It Personal. So I'm blatantly copying her. I love copying my students. Why shouldn't I? They're my students. So I'm just going to put out a bit more dye. So a slightly different way this time. I have tried putting dye on the blocks and printing on here. It doesn't work as well. You can't really get enough on. What does work is to put a layer of dye over your screen like this. Try and keep it fairly even, but don't, for goodness sake, stress yourself up about it. Nothing that I'm ever going to tell you is worth stressing about. Okay, let's have a bit with it. And then I'm just going to press the blocks into that dye. Okay, so that's my 3 ammonites on there, and I am going to put that to one side to dry as well. Getting tricky. Just going round the camera. Be right back, chaps. Now then, so then miraculously, it's a different stencil here, but here is one that is already dry. So this is the tree stencil. You probably recognise this. We've used this quite a bit, and this has now dried, and this is ready to print. So this is basically doing a breakdown print. So the dye is completely dry on this screen. I'm just going to come a bit nearer because I feel as though I keep going off screen. That's better. So the dye is completely dry on this screen, so I'm going to get myself a piece of fabric. This has had soda soaked into it, so it's ready to receive dye. And I'm going to start. And I usually try a first print releasing it with just Manutex, okay? So all I'm looking to do here is re-wet this print. So if we get my jug of Manutex and a spoon, and I'm just going to spoon some Manutex into the screen. I don't need loads. Put it down, get working fairly quickly because it starts to, you can see it's already dissolving my dye. I'm pulling it down across the screen. I can see the dye is moving, and one surefire way that tells me it's moving is the fact that the dye on my squeegee is now red. Now I'm going to get rid of that onto another tray. For once in my life, no, I won't burst into song there. I could have done, but I won't. I don't want to pollute everything. I'd like to keep my colours relatively pure, and the reason is dye is transparent. The colours will mix visually, and I would all get quite muddy if I don't keep it quite clean. So I've squeegeed off the excess there. I'm just going to lift it up a tiny bit to see what's going. Yes, and I have a print off. So there's my first breakdown print. Let's just pop that behind me. Obviously it's upside down to you. I will turn it round eventually. But you can see I have a print of the trees there. Okay, so let's do one more with just Manutex. We'll place that next to it, okay? Typically for me, I've got too many things on the table. There we go. Okay, so again, got my squeegee ready, which in this case is a credit card. Get some Manutex. and just put it along the screen. As soon as it hits the die here, it will start dissolving it. So it doesn't matter, but if you leave it for a long time in the well while you yak away like me, what will happen is it will release more at the top than the bottom because it's had longer to soak there. So I'm getting it right across my screen. Taking off the excess again, which is very red. I mean, I will just throw this away. The dye's cheap, Manutex is cheap. I'm not wasting much here. And I'd rather do this and keep some definition in my prints, because if I started printing over then with this red dye, I will lose the contrast that I've got here. So again, I'm just going to check it's printed, and it has. So we have a second print. Very similar to the first, but the dye is just starting to break down a little bit more. So let's have a look what happens if we release it with a different colour. So let's start off here, and let's use lemon. Okay, so we're in the same colour family here. Lemon and red should mix together to make orange. So let's see what we get. Anybody see what I did with my squeegee? There it is. Ooh, it is messy, this, because all this goo I keep taking off, I keep having to get rid of. So it's a bit of a messy process, but that's okay. Remember, I've got barrier cream on my hands, so although I'm not gloving up for this because I just couldn't cope with it in gloves personally, there's no dye going into my system. It may be going on me, it's not going in me. Okay, so more glue. To some degree, the longer you leave your screen to dry, the slower it will be to release, but not by any hugely significant amount. I think this is, I'm just going to wash off my squeegee a bit. It's getting really gooey. I think this is a bit slower releasing than the ones we did at the workshop the other day. Right, I've washed my hands. Barrier cream, the barrier cream I'm using is waterproof, so I don't need to redo. If I washed them and scrubbed them with either soap or Stoco, I would re-barrier cream, but that was just to rinse some water. So this time, you can see I've still got the outlines of the trees, but I've got yellow coming through in between, and my die print is really hanging up here. This is going to be one of those that is going to make an awful lot of prints. You know, sometimes they release fast, sometimes they release slow, and this is one of the joy of breakdown printing, to my mind, is it's so unpredictable. So what I'm going to do with this one, we'll use this squeegee, which has got turquoise. I'll put lime on this time. Now I'm opposite sides of the colour wheel here, so I have some degree of browning of my red may well take place, but I'm going to live with that and see what I get. Let's take off that excess again. It's all polluted colour, this now. I don't worry about holding my squeegees at 45-degree angles or about even pressure. There may be reasons, maybe you get more predictable printing, I don't know, but for me this just works fine. Just get it whacked through. All I'm trying to do is get it through the screen. Right, I'm going to have a little peep underneath. No, that's nice. That's a really interesting one. So we're starting to release the red now. I'll photograph this cloth better for you, but you can see the red starting to come off in the background. I've got green in the foreground, so I've got green, yellow and two neutrals. I think what I'm going to do, because I've only got 5 minutes left, I want to show you one of the block ones. I would carry on printing with this and I will show you the results. But for the moment, I'm just going to move that one so I can show you the block one and try and avoid one of my hugely long, great, multiple videos. Right, so this is the screen. Again, this is the A3 screen, and this time I have done as I said I do. I have masked off an area of this screen so that I've got a squarish space left in the middle, and these are the blocks that I've put on it. And all I'm going to do, it sounds awful, but it doesn't break the screen. Now if it's really stuck, go on to the other side and push it a bit, and it will trigger it off. So I say it doesn't rip the screen. Obviously, when I'm demonstrating, it will do, won't it? But it doesn't. Off they come, even a big boy like that, and a little leaf. Okay, so those are my blocks off. So I have got here a really mixed up screen. Now these are just a bit, I mean, these are impossible to predict what these are going to do. So I'm going to do it on paper to begin with. See what, because we printed on fabric last time. Let's see what this one's like on paper. So again, plain Manutex to begin with, so that we can actually get a notion of what the print's like. Squeegee, and what squeegee will do. Let's go. Okay. Right, so down we go, pulling this. I don't know that I'm going to get much off that middle leaf because I can see that. We'll see. We'll see. I can see that the die, I didn't press very hard with the leaf when I put it on, so the die is quite even on there. But let's see. Let's take that off and see what we've got. And if you want a gunge print, feel free to pull some of the gunge off your revolting gunge tray. Okay. Okay, we've got a first print. As I said, there's not a lot to come off the big leaf yet, but we've got the items around the edges, so let's just keep going and see what we get. And you have to be prepared with breakdown printing to take it on the chin a bit and just deal with what happens. So let's try that yellow, because that was nice, I liked that. And let's add a bit of lime into it, why not? And this, this girls is where I'm about, and boys, sorry, is where I'm about to go muddy probably, but never mind. I can just see that there's some quite big holes in my screen. So it'd be quite good to get a bit of colour through those boyos, wouldn't it? In fact, I'm going to try and get a bit of turquoise through them as well. That's jolly, isn't it? And I'm going to give it a bit of a loving push in the middle here where I can feel there's so much dye over that leaf, and see if I can get it to start releasing. Okay, let's see what we've got. Okay, I'm liking that. The leaf is starting to come a little bit more. These have come out in colour. What I'm really wanting is this middle bit to start breaking, but let's see, let's keep going. Let's do one in turquoise and lime this time. Oh, I've put loads on there, that was a bit silly. Let's take a bit off and put it on my tray, because I'm never going to use that on this little print, and it is a waste. Okay. You can press surprisingly hard on a silk screen. Not on a Thermofax, you'll go straight through it, but you can on a silk screen. You can give it some welly. I'm pushing down really hard here, and I'm also going on with my finger where I want to release some of this dye, and I really would like that little devil to start releasing more. Okay, off with the gunge, up with the screen, it's coming. You can see that I'm getting the biggest contrast of colours, obviously I am, where the holes in the screen are. I'm getting less, but I am starting to get that leaf showing through. So let's fill some of these gaps around with, I'll use this bit of, I think it's mainly lime on here, and I'm just going to focus on the leaf bit here on the edge. Determined, I can see bits of the leaf finally breaking down and letting a bit of colour through. Don't want to reprint over there. Oh, my screen, I pressed too hard there. I've actually started whole bits peeling off, but I'm not bothered about that either. Let's put that piece in there. You can see this is a very unpredictable technique. My screen is really peeling off now. I've no idea why. I've no idea why. It doesn't always do this. Sometimes it does it with stencils, sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes it does it with blocks and sometimes it doesn't. Maybe the pressure I'm putting on, no idea, but I never worry about things like that. I just get on with it. I'm just filling in the space now, using bits of the screen that still have some areas left on them. There's a bit there. Look, we've still got some of that nice leaf in there. Let's get that off if we can. Into the middle. Whoa! It's peeling off all over the place. These, as it dries, these bits will peel back. These bits where the screen itself has disintegrated. And we've got some pattern there, so we'll fill in that gap. And we've got some here, so let's fill in. That's gone really muddy. Let's get some brighter blue. Camera's going to wind up on me in a minute, so I'm just going to try and fill this, but I will show you this properly on a photo so you can see it and see what we've done here. I have to say that is not the best breakdown of blocks I've ever done. I've seen better than that, but that is the unpredictability of screen printing, and I don't worry about it because these are all materials for collage in my case. So I'm quite happy to have ones that aren't as I expected, that have